appointed the past 5 Governors-General of Australia lawfully. We can tell you, because we have it in writing, that the Privy Council denies any allegation that the last 5 Governors-General were lawfully appointed according to the requirements of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. And even if they were appointed by a power foreign to the Commonwealth of Australia, and that would mean that the fact that they have not been lawfully appointed means that every law they've created or given supposed royal assent to is null and void ab initio. Or, if they have been appointed according to that law, they are an employee of a foreign power, and every law that they have given royal assent to is void ab initio and illegal, can't be used. You know, this whole thing's a farce. You know, it's not a matter of me standing here and saying it. These are just the cold, hard facts. These are the cold, hard facts of life in respect of this country. There is no document of acquiescence. There is no treaty. You know, we only have to look at the documents from back, the contemporaneous documents from the time that Australia came into being. And all the way down the line, the orders were, we should treaty with these people, we should treaty with these people, we should treaty with these people, we should stop the war. But the fact is, the thieves who came here in the name of the Crown, and with the blessing of the Crown, but in utter ignorance by the Crown of their actions, have just continued to rape and pillage. They have no morals, they have no ethics, they have no scruples. And that continues to this day with our current government. A government who would break its neck to turn Australia into a republic just to avoid the issue, the obligation and the necessity of dealing with the indigenous Australian people, the Aborigine peoples here, acknowledging our sovereignty and dealing with us with the respect that we deserve, and dealing with us when it comes to issuing mining rights over our land. You know, we've got a government who takes 100% of the royalties and hands 15% of the royalties over to the sovereigns. This has got to stop. It's not good enough. And regardless of what Mr Rudd does and says, and regardless of what Mr Rudd's thugs in their blue jackets do and say, stopping me is not going to stop this. This information is out there for the world to see. You know, the fact is that the time has come. The time has come for Australia to stand up and start behaving as an adult, because we're sick and tired of being told what to do by a bunch of inbred ingrates from a foreign power. We don't need that anymore. The British claim that because they exercised, or rather forced, their laws over the Aborigine people in Australia, that this illegal act of forcing their laws over us gave legitimacy to the continuation of that illegal act of the use of British law against us. It's an interesting statement. You know, that effectively they were talking about a couple of cases where Charles Kilmeister and 6 other colonists were tried before Mr Justice Burton in Sydney in December 1838, and they were executed for the murder of 2 Aboriginal children and an adult Aboriginal named Charlie. And they claim that this shows how the English law has been applied in criminal cases between the colonists and the Aborigines. It's interesting, it states here that the report says that they are aware, however, that Mr Montgomery Martin, in his history of this colony, thus mentions the case of the Aboriginal Black Tommy, who was hanged for murder in Sydney in 1827. The circumstances, he says, connected with the execution were very similar and deserved publicity. From the statement previously made to me, I believe the man to be innocent, and I therefore attended his trial to aid in the defence of a man who knew not a word of our language and owed no obedience to our laws. And the judge even made the comment himself that he was not sure, quote, that I can legally exercise any jurisdiction with reference to any crimes committed by the Aborigines against each other. Now, this select committee was the reporting, the select committee's review of the interaction with Aborigines is very interesting. There were a number of very important points made and acknowledged by the Parliament through this committee document. And I ask that question again, as asked by the judge of the day. Could the judge legally exercise any jurisdiction with reference to any crimes committed by Aborigines against each other? And the answer is obviously no. the British had no jurisdiction over anyone other than their own subjects. And as a matter of fact, the issue of jurisdiction was that obscure and that remote and that removed from the possibility of them having jurisdiction in this country. The issue of jurisdiction wasn't addressed by the Parliament until 50 years after this committee, because they knew themselves, hang on, we don't have the right to do this. Can I judge these people? No, I can't. But why can't I? Because they're not subject to our law. The early settlers knew this. There was no obedience required by Aboriginal people to British law, and there still is not. And I say that not to tell people that, oh, hang on, Aboriginal people are above the law, because we're not. We're subject to our own law. And our own law, quite frankly, is far more harsh in respect of its penalties than British law. And one of the reasons that Aboriginal people don't like the British law is because we inherently know from the day that we are born that we aren't British subjects. We're not subject to British law. This parliamentary committee reviewed a whole range of different issues relating to the issue of sovereignty and the issue of possession of land and the issue of the exercise of jurisdiction against Aboriginal people. Comments made, for example, the report further states, quote, "It might be presumed that the native inhabitants of any land have an incontrovertible right to their own soil. It is a plain and sacred right which seems not to have been understood by the British. Europeans have entered their borders uninvited, and when there, have not only acted as if they were the undoubted landlords of the soil, but have punished the natives as aggressors if they evinced a disposition to live in their own country." Now, what right did they have to do this? The fact that they just had a belligerent disregard for the laws and the rights and the civil rights of Aboriginal people pursuant to Aboriginal law doesn't mean that they were a superior race or from a superior nation or from a superior society, or that their laws were superior, or in fact that they had somehow usurped our law with their law. That is cold hard fact. We can't get around that. There is no evidence that law was ever lawfully usurped, or jurisdiction was ever lawfully usurped. And we must also remind the judges in the courts currently of a statement made by one of the lords during this review. He said that a judge must not wrest the law to his authority. In other words, a judge must not get hold of law and twist it and turn it and manipulate it so as to give himself authority. And this was what happened in Australia. The judges over the last X amount of years in the Supreme Court of New South Wales in particular, and the magistrates' courts, or local courts as we call them now, these people have turned around and they've exercised a jurisdiction they knew that they did not have. What did they do? They took the law and they wrested it. They wrestled with it. They brought the law to subjection of their own mind so that they could have a jurisdiction that they didn't lawfully possess and don't lawfully possess. And that was one of the things that this parliamentary report said, hey, the judges should not do this in the colonies. Now we see Mr. Sax Bannister, formerly Attorney General of this colony, in his evidence before the same committee on the 31st of August 1835, after complaining that in his time in New South Wales an interpreter between the Aboriginal people and the courts was unable to be found to come into any court of justice. And he says in the report to the committee, he says, "We ought forthwith to begin at least to reduce the laws and usages of the Aboriginal tribes to Aboriginal language, and print them, and direct our courts of justice to respect those laws." Why? Why, if they had jurisdiction, should they respect our laws? The reason being that the people knew, various of the people knew, or they all knew, there was those who chose not to take notice, but they all knew that the Aboriginal people are sovereign. The Aboriginal people in this land are sovereign. They have their own systems of laws. They cannot be usurped. It could not be done lawfully. He says, hence it is evident, according to Mr. Bannister's testimony, that the Aborigines of the colony have laws and usages of their own. Mr. Bannister also handed a paper to Mr. T.F.